All right, talking about some North American roster changes today, but also I wanted to talk about the SI closed qualifiers. They are still ongoing. We saw the APAC one a little bit ago, and then last weekend, the LATAM qualifier was supposed to take place and it began, but then it was delayed and canceled. And so it's sort of all up in the air right now. It's in limbo. It's unclear what's going to happen. I think some people think they might end up doing a direct invite to, I don't know, Black Dragons, or it might be one of the teams. I don't think they'll probably do that. It seems it just seems too strange to do it at this point. But some number of the players and I think one of the teams from the LATAM qualifier has just left Siege, and some of the players left the team, and maybe before or after that happened. I don't know. It's a whole crazy situation. I think Caliber Jacob has a video up detailing it. Came out a few days ago, so maybe there's been some new developments since then. But as of now, they haven't played. They were originally supposed to play on LAN, but that's where some of the problems started arising. And so I assume they'll do it online at some point with some number of the teams. And okay, unclear, right? And then the EU qualifier was just earlier today, or rather the first day was. The second day is tomorrow. So I guess spoiler warning here, if you haven't seen the games, don't know what happens in the games, and you don't want to know, tune out for a second. Kavana are currently in the grand final, awaiting the winner of a game between Secret and Eminem. So Kavana beat Eminem, and then they beat Secret to proceed to the grand finals. And in the first round, Secret beat Vitality, who I think some people thought was probably going to be the winner of the closed qualifier. And then Eminem also beat Vitality. So again, loser finals between Eminem and Secret, and then the winner of that will go on to play Kavana in the grand final, and that'll be tomorrow if you want to tune into that. And so let's talk about the roster changes. These are all NA teams, some number of T1 and T2 teams. Technically, T2 is a little bit of an ambiguous term at this point, with the fate of NACL being sort of up in the air. I mean, it's entirely possible it'll just resume next year, or rather, I mean this year, next competitive year, but later this calendar year. Like nothing happened. But as far as I understand it, it's still unclear what's going to be happening with it. So, right, all of these teams down here are T2 teams, and then I guess technically XSET is also a T2 team at the moment. Former T1 team got relegated. And so, right, let's just talk about these. These aren't all of the changes, but they're the T1 changes and then a select number of the T2 changes. Right, so XSET and Beast Coast I talked about already in a previous video. And I mean, I'll go over it briefly if you didn't watch that one. Filthy, NVK, and Creators were all dropped from the playing roster for XSET, and Jarvis was dropped from the coaching position. They also had another coach, Drew Spark, but I think he's still in the UK. That's where he's from, and so he was doing it remotely. So they had him, and then they also had Jarvis, who was there in person. I believe he's remote. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but as far as I understand it, he is. And so I don't know if they are looking for another coach, or if just all of the coaching duties will be taken over by Drew Spark, but certainly they have to fill at least 3 spots on their roster, which currently has just Prod and Razor on it. I don't know if either of them are going to continue being on the roster, and it just hasn't been announced yet. Razor's been playing with other players in small events, but that doesn't mean that he's not still on the XSET roster. And then, right. So Beast Coast, Fozo, Young Alec, Jay, and Sippin all dropped from the playing roster, leaving only Anthony on the roster, and Mark the Shark in a playing position. So they have a lot of spots to fill. And I suppose at this point I'll mention the most wanted man on r/r6 Pro League. Sweater, his ban ended. He had a 1-year ban. It started, I believe, last January and ended just a few days ago. He cheated in Warzone or something in some other game, and so he got a competitive ban in Siege as well, because I don't know, for competitive integrity purposes and all this stuff. Anyways, the ban's done. He was playing in T3 recently with Mystic, but he's left Mystic, and he is allegedly, apparently, on some T1 team. He's had on his bio on Twitter, and he keeps tweeting out Rep the Set and Astralis Family and all this stuff. So he's sort of teased that he might be on those 2 teams, or SSG, or I think people think XSET maybe. And he was sort of on XSET before. He was on the roster that got picked up by XSET, but he was replaced by Butters because of what happened. And so again, not technically on the roster, but he was part of that lineage, and he didn't play with any of those guys that are still on the roster. Razor and Prod were more recent pickups, but anyway, it's just sort of interesting to know. Maybe he's going to Beast Coast, maybe he is going to XSET, maybe goes to Astralis. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. And then the other 6 NAL teams being, Parabellum, Space Station, Sonics, Auction, Dark Zero, and TSM. I don't think any of them have announced that they're dropping any players, and I'm sure they probably won't until most of them after SI, and maybe TSM and Mirage could announce something after the close calls, but it's so close to SI. Probably if any of them are dropping players, it'll be announced after SI. So, maybe he does end up joining one of those rosters if they were planning to drop a player, because, just a really, really coveted player, just really skilled. We haven't seen him in a T1 environment, but everyone thinks he'll do very well. Just really good. Okay, so, right, that's the sweater shuffle. Let's talk about Astralis. They dropped easily a little bit ago. He was their coach, or he left. I don't know, maybe it was mutual. Whatever the deal was, he's gone. And Retro, this was just announced yesterday or the day before, I believe. And people had been asking for the change for the longest time. I don't know, because they just thought he underperformed. He was one of the 2 really tenured players on the roster. Him and Shuttle have been playing the game for a very long time, and they've gone through a few players on the roster, but now, of course, it's DP Fire, Iconic, and J90 are the other 3. And they're fairly new players, but as time goes on, they're becoming more and more tenured. And just Retro's put up a lackluster performance at times. Still having his moments and whatnot, but inevitably being dropped. They look like they probably needed some sort of a change. Maybe it didn't need to be a roster change, but they needed to change something up after how their stage 3 went. They were really struggling. Definitely a descent from maybe not absolute greatness, but they were one of the top 4 teams in the first stage, and then they dropped down a little bit for the second stage. Almost top 4, but they ended up losing that last game to the Sonics, and then they were even struggling to get out of the last place spot in this last stage. So Retro got dropped, and it's unclear who will be replacing him, and also who they'll be picking up as a coach. I want to say I saw Astralis tweeting out that they, after this happened, that one of their top priorities is filling that coaching position. They went a really long time, if I remember right, without a coach before Easily joined, so we'll see if they have to do it again. I don't think it's especially easy to find a really good coach these days, or ever, really. I mean, it's just it's difficult to be a good coach, right? DZ, this looks really exciting, right? But if you're unaware, Pengu got picked up as a content creator for DZ. It's not a player or coach or anything, but I still thought it was notable enough to put on here. And, maybe we'll have to see what happens in the future. Maybe he finds his way onto the playing roster at some point. But for now, Pengu is playing in SCS with a few other guys. Just for fun, have something to do, whatever it is. Maybe to stay sharp, who knows? Okay, but I just thought that was noteworthy enough to include. Investigation File got picked up by Dallas Vendetta, and they've also had a couple of roster changes. So the reason I chose these CL teams were they're basically some of the best teams from Challenger League that are still around. Aerial Rise, I'll talk about that in a minute. And then Nocturne's not necessarily a top flight one, but I just threw them on here. Over the course of the 2021 season, probably the best teams from CL were definitely Parabellum, who are now in T1, Wichita Wolves. I suppose it was before they were Wichita Wolves. They won stage 1 of the season. They were still 8th at the time, but pretty much the same team. And they've fallen off since then, but they won one of the stages, so it's definitely noteworthy. And then Investigation File and Aerial Rise, probably the 2 teams closest to Parabellum from Challenger League that are on here. And also I need to mention One Shot, but they're not on here because they haven't made any roster moves, of course. So, right, these are all some of the better T2 teams. Okay, so Investigation File picked up by Dallas Vendetta, so now they have an org backing them, so that should be big. And they dropped Subarctic and Arrow, and they picked up Nuairs and Kento. So we'll have to see how this goes for the roster. Subarctic was definitely, performing in a lackluster fashion. He got dropped. And I want to say I saw some of the players saying that they were looking for a more aggressive player to make their team more aggressive, and that that's manifested in their Nuairs pickup. The Arrow drop, though, I don't know if this was more of the team wanted to drop him or more if he wanted to leave, whatever the deal was there. But he was the top rated player in the regular season for Stage 3 by a decent margin, and he played, his main operators were Maverick and Goyo. I think he played a lot of flank watch. So he put up killer stats for the position he was playing, and just killer stats regardless, the number 1 rated player. So it's a little bit interesting if they decided to drop him. Maybe it was something internal. Maybe it was what he wanted. But Kento is a good pickup regardless, coming from Aerial Rise, another one of those really good T2 teams. And okay, let's talk about Wichita Wolves now. They dropped Abinai. This was a little bit ago. And Jay seems to be back on the roster. He was with them before. I don't remember if they were Wichita Wolves just yet. He was definitely on Ape. He played recently for Beast Coast in the most recent stage of the NAL, but he decided to leave, and I talked about that in the video where I talked about Xset and Beast Coast. I have Reed in parentheses here because very recently, I think Reed was standing in for Jay, Reed being the coach, and Jay not playing for some reason. And I don't know if any of these changes are like, or the droppings are official. I don't know if these are like official pickups, or if these are like trialing, because it's not like we're into another Challenger League stage or anything. These are still T3 competitions, which means, you know, they're not necessarily locked in rosters for the actual T2 competition. So we'll have to see. Right, barring for Forrest, and this is another one of the ones, I don't know if this was decided by the team or decided by Forrest just wanting to leave. He was probably one of their better players, at least one of their better performing players. And of course, being on certain roles means you probably perform better. And he was playing those roles, not so much of a support player as he was, you know, a fragger. But Forrest now playing on, what are they called? West Garfield Park, a team that was just thrown together with him, Rudy, Biologic, Twist, and Psychosis, I think. And they're playing in SCS. I think they're 0-1 right now. So if they go 0-2, I believe they're out. That's how that works, right? They didn't do too, or no, they did okay in the first game. I want to say they got 2-0'd, but it was like 11-15 in terms of rounds or something. So not terrible, but they didn't win. So anything else to mention here? Probably not. It's pretty straightforward. Again, sort of a fall from grace from winning stage 1 down to not doing too hot recently, and especially with these little bit of the roster changes, roster struggles, whatever it is. So we'll see if they can return to their former greatness. Aerial Arise, it's just not the same team anymore. Currently, they are playing in SCS, and it's just, I think, Wimpy with 4 other players. And I think it's Beastly is the other player on the roster, if I remember right. But Kento, Diaz Lucas, and Gomez are all gone. Kento, of course, going to Investigation File, now Dallas Vendetta. And Diaz Lucas and Gomez, they have not been yet announced, but it's speculated, and it seems pretty likely that they're going to T1 teams. I think some people think maybe one of them to Xset, one of them to Beast Coast. Maybe one of these is going to go to Astralis. And, well, I said T1 teams. Again, technically Xset not a T1 team at the moment. They did get relegated, but it's entirely possible that they get the invite for the 10th spot. So we'll have to see what happens there. And yeah, pretty much everybody thinks that Gomez and Diaz Lucas are going to be on T1 teams. Just not clear which ones. Okay, and then yeah, as I said before, Aerial Rise are just not really the same thing. I mean, they're still under the name, but it's just one of their players playing with 4 other players. But maybe they intend to pick up those players come Challenger League. Maybe they're trialing them. Whatever it is. Okay. And then finally, Nocturnes. I think they dropped Pox a little while ago. I don't remember, but the Poison pickup was pretty recent. Maybe they're trying somebody out, but I guess they picked up Poison. He was playing on Two-Faced recently, so he got dropped from there, and he's on Nocturnes now. So I think that pretty well covers everything that's happened. I think there have been a few other moves, and of course, there's been some new teams formed, like that West Garfield Park I mentioned before, and then various moves on like the lower tier T2 teams, and then some T3 teams, and some of the T3 teams might be T2 teams come next season. We'll have to see. And yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see what happens with Xset and Beast Coast and Astralis in particular, being T1 or T1 potential teams. And then of course, if any of the other T1 teams, any of the other NAL teams decide to drop players, I'll be interested to see who replaces them. So, okay, yeah, if you have any comments, leave them below. If you have any questions, let me know. And with all of that being said, I will catch you in the next video.